There is a truth that few people notice. The deepest transformation in life does not require a long time. It does not need perfect conditions. It happens the moment we turn inward and look directly at our own mind. This is what Buddhism calls immediate inner transformation. We often believe that peace will come only after we change our life. We try to fix circumstances, fix people, fix the future. Yet no matter how far we go, if the mind is still pulled outward, the tiredness remains. Not because life is wrong, but because we have forgotten how to stay with ourselves. According to the Buddha's teachings, all suffering begins in the mind, and it is also from the mind that transformation begins. Not tomorrow, not when everything becomes easier, but right in this moment. Peace does not come from the outside. Do not seek it there. The 12 Buddhist principles in this video are not meant to turn you into someone else. They gently guide you back to your original self within. Sit down. Breathe. Transformation begins here. Principle 1. Letting go of the illusion of control. Human suffering often does not come from life being too harsh, but from our constant desire to control everything around us. We want others to behave according to our expectations. We want outcomes to follow our plans. We want the future to move in the direction we have already drawn out. When that does not happen, the mind immediately gives rise to restlessness, disappointment, and fear. In Buddhism, this is called attachment. Attachment to what we believe should happen. Attachment to an image of an ideal life. The Buddha taught that all phenomena are impermanent. Nothing remains fixed or follows our will forever. When we try to hold on to what cannot be held, suffering arises. He reminded us that we only truly lose what we cling to. The tighter we hold, the more it hurts. The more we try to control, the more exhausted the mind becomes. It is important to clearly distinguish between control and responsibility. Responsibility means doing our best within our capacity. Control means demanding that outcomes unfold exactly as we want. We are responsible for living kindly, working sincerely, and responding with awareness. But we have no authority to control how others think or which direction life turns. When these two are confused, we place unnecessary pressure on ourselves. Letting go of the illusion of control does not make us passive or resigned. On the contrary, it makes us more grounded. When we no longer pour our energy into forcing life to move according to our will, we begin to turn inward. We realize that there is one thing always within our reach, the response of the mind. We cannot choose the event, but we can choose how we are present with it. In the spirit of Buddhism, mastering the response of the mind is the first step toward inner freedom. When things happen, we no longer resist or blame. We observe emotions arise and fade. We breathe and remain. In that moment, peace does not come from everything becoming perfect, but from no longer losing ourselves. When attachment loosens, we begin to hear ourselves again. Principle 2. Sitting with yourself. Instead of escaping, the modern world constantly places countless doors in front of us to escape through. When an uncomfortable emotion arises, we immediately look for something else to fill the space. A glowing screen, a conversation, a familiar sound. Not because these things are wrong, but because we have grown used to abandoning ourselves whenever the mind feels unsettled. Silence becomes something many people fear. In silence, there is nowhere left to hide. When the noise disappears, the mind begins to speak on its own. Unheard thoughts, suppressed emotions, questions we have long avoided. We call this unease, but in truth it is reality knocking at the door. In Buddhism, silence is not emptiness. Silence is the space where the mind reveals itself exactly as it is. When the Buddha taught mindfulness, he did not ask us to fix or push anything away. He taught us how to see without judgment, to see without identification, to see as if watching clouds drift across the sky. Sitting with yourself is therefore not about forcing the mind to become calm. It is not about making thoughts disappear. It is not about reaching a special state. Sitting is simply sitting. Breathing is simply breathing. When emotions come, you know they have come. When emotions go, you know they have gone. You do not chase them. You do not push them away. You do not try to fix them. At first, staying with yourself can feel very difficult. The mind will search for every reason to leave. The body may feel restless. But if you are gentle enough to remain, something begins to change. You realize that the emotions you once feared are not trying to harm you. They only want to be seen. Healing does not begin when you understand something new. It begins when you stop running away. When you allow yourself to sit with whatever is present, the mind gradually settles. And from that settling, you begin to hear your true inner voice. When you learn to stay with yourself, you open the first door through which immediate inner transformation begins. Principle 3. Embracing pain to be reborn. In everyday life, people learn to avoid pain. We treat suffering as a mistake that must be fixed, something abnormal that should be removed as quickly as possible. Yet in Buddhism, suffering is not denied, and it is not seen as an enemy. Suffering is part of the truth of life, and it is precisely from this place that the path of awakening begins to open. The Buddha did not promise a life without pain. He pointed out that suffering is the quietest teacher. When body and mind touch suffering, we are forced to stop. We can no longer continue living on the surface as before. Pain compels us to look more deeply into ourselves. It raises questions that comfort can never ask. In nature, a seed that wishes to grow into a tree must accept being broken open. The hard shell that once protected it has to crack so that the sprout can emerge. If the seed insists on keeping its original form, it will never grow. Human beings are the same. The most painful moments are often when the old sense of self can no longer stand. And that is precisely the opportunity for transformation. We often ask why this is happening to us, why me, and not someone else. That question causes the mind to contract and fall into self-pity. Buddhism offers another way of seeing. Instead of asking why, we are invited to ask what this is teaching me. When the question changes, the mind begins to open. From being a victim, we become a learner. Pain by itself does not destroy a person. The way we resist pain is what exhausts us. When we allow ourselves to stay with suffering, without avoiding it, without denying it, and without blaming ourselves, something unexpected happens. Pain begins to reveal its wisdom. We see clearly what no longer fits. We recognize the silent attachments that have been holding us back. We understand more deeply compassion for ourselves and for others. When suffering is seen through mindfulness, it is no longer a dark and shapeless shadow. It becomes a guiding light. It restructures the mind through awareness and humility. From this, a new person gradually takes shape. Not stronger in a rigid way, but deeper, more peaceful, and freer from within. Principle 4. Living simply to expand the spirit. There is a paradox in modern life. The more we possess, the heavier we tend to feel. Not only heavy because of material things, but heavy within the mind itself. Too many choices, too much information, and too many concerns leave the mind with no space to rest. In Buddhism, this state is called a restless mind. Not because life is wrong, but because we have been carrying too much of what is unnecessary. The Buddha taught simplicity and contentment not so that people would live in deprivation or withdraw from the world. Simplicity does not mean poverty. Contentment does not mean accepting suffering. In the Buddhist spirit, simplicity means clarity. Clarity about what is truly needed. Clarity about what is merely a habit of clinging. When the mind becomes clear, life naturally feels lighter. We often believe that adding more will make us feel safer. More possessions to feel complete. More relationships to avoid loneliness. More thinking to control the future. Yet the more we add, the more scattered the mind becomes. The simplicity that Buddhism points to begins with letting go. Letting go of objects that no longer serve a genuine life. Letting go of relationships maintained only by obligation and fear. Letting go of repetitive thoughts that lead neither to understanding nor to compassion. Letting go is not loss. Letting go creates space. When a room is cleared, light finally has a place to enter. When life is simplified, the mind begins to have space to breathe. We no longer waste energy preserving what no longer fits. Attention returns to what is essential: a simple meal enjoyed with full presence, a quiet conversation with sincerity, a moment of silence that feels deep. As life becomes lighter, the mind naturally moves inward. No longer pulled endlessly by desire, the mind has a chance to settle. From that settling, wisdom slowly emerges. We see more clearly what is happening within us. We respond more slowly, yet with greater understanding. Clarity does not come from knowing more, but from no longer being covered by excess. Living simply, therefore, does not make life smaller. It allows the spirit to expand. When we are no longer pulled in many directions at once, we are more fully present in each moment. From that presence, the mind deepens and wisdom brightens. This is not a dramatic external change. It is an inner transformation that occurs the moment we dare to live with less in order to live more truthfully. Principle 5. Becoming the observer. Instead of reacting, much of the suffering in life does not come from circumstances themselves, but from how we react to them. A word touches the ego. An old memory is stirred. A familiar fear appears. And almost immediately, the mind is swept away. We become angry. We worry. We feel sad. We react before we even realize what is happening. In Buddhism, this state is called identification with the mind, when we believe that our thoughts are who we are and our emotions are who we are. According to the Buddha's teachings, you are not the thoughts appearing in your head. You are also not the emotions rising in your chest. You are the one who is aware of them, just as the sky is not the clouds passing through it. When this is understood, a door to inner freedom begins to open. We are no longer carried away by everything that arises in the mind. The practice of mindfulness begins very simply. When an emotion appears, instead of reacting, we name it, silently saying within ourselves that anger is present, fear is present, sadness is present. Naming is not meant to analyze or suppress. It simply helps us step back one pace. In that moment, we are no longer the anger or the fear. We become the one who is seeing them. Between stimulus and response, there is always a very small pause. That pause is often overlooked because of our habit of reacting quickly. Yet that very place is the key to freedom. When we stop, even for a single breath, we reclaim our ability to choose. We may choose not to speak words that wound, not to act from fear, not to repeat an old pattern. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the path leading out of suffering. That pause does not remove emotion. It only creates space so that emotion does not control us. When we breathe and remain, emotions arise and pass on their own. We learn that no state lasts forever. Awareness allows us to trust the mind's natural ability to regulate itself without force. Freedom is not found in controlling every thought. Freedom lives in the moment we are no longer dragged along by them. When we become the observer instead of the reactor, outer life may remain the same, but inner life changes completely. We live more slowly, more deeply, and with greater steadiness in the face of all change. This is the core lesson of the entire journey of inner transformation. Principle 6. Letting go of the identity formed by wounds. Each person carries an image of themselves inside. This image does not arise on its own. It is shaped by painful experiences, by criticism, by abandonment, by moments when we were not seen. Gradually, we begin to name ourselves through those wounds. I am an anxious person. I always fail. I am not good enough. These statements sound like truth, but in reality, they are only stories the mind has memorized. In Buddhism, the self is not a fixed entity. The Buddha taught that what we call the self is only a temporary combination of sensations, thoughts, memories, and habits. When pain occurs, the mind clings to it to create a sense of safety. From there, an identity is formed. But that identity is not who you truly are. It is only a survival response from a certain period of your life. When we say, I am an anxious person, We turn a temporary state into a permanent identity. We begin to live and choose based on that story. We limit ourselves without realizing it. Buddhism calls this attachment to self, clinging to an imagined image and forgetting the impermanent nature of all phenomena. Letting go of identity does not mean denying the past or rejecting the person you once were. On the contrary, it begins with forgiveness. Forgiving the version of yourself that did everything it could to survive. Forgiving the clumsy reactions that once helped you get through pain. When compassion arises, there is no longer a need to hold tightly to the old story for protection. Inner transformation does not ask you to become someone else. You do not need to construct a new and more perfect image. What is being invited here is simply the removal of layers that are no longer needed. Like a coat that once kept you warm but has grown too tight and now makes it hard to breathe. When that coat is taken off, nothing is lost. Principle 7. Learning to walk alone with awareness. There are phases in life when we suddenly feel that we are moving more slowly than the world around us. Relationships that once felt familiar begin to fade. Voices that once guided us are no longer present. A sense of loneliness appears, and we often rush to label it as abandonment. Yet in Buddhism, loneliness does not mean loss. Loneliness can be a sign that we are entering a period of preparation for inner maturity. Loneliness is different from emptiness. Emptiness is when we cannot stay with ourselves. Loneliness is when we begin to loosen our dependence on what is familiar. When there is no one left to lean on, the mind is invited to stand upright on its own. It is within this space that awareness has a chance to take root. We no longer define ourselves through the eyes of others. We begin to look directly into our own inner life. The story of the Buddha leaving the palace is a profound reflection of this truth. He stepped away from comfort, abundance, and familiar bonds to walk the path of solitude. Not because he rejected life, but because he needed a space quiet enough to see clearly the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. His awakening did not occur in a crowd, but in deep stillness. When we walk alone, without someone guiding every step, we are compelled to listen to ourselves. Questions that were once covered up begin to surface. We start to see what truly matters and what is merely a habit of living according to others. In that silence, a new voice gradually appears. It is not loud or demanding, but it is honest. It is the voice of inner understanding. Walking alone does not mean turning away from the world. It is a necessary phase so that we do not lose ourselves within it. When we no longer depend on constant validation, we become steadier. When we no longer fear being left behind, we become freer in our relationships. We are with others not out of fear, but out of conscious choice. The power of walking alone lies in how it brings us back to the center of our inner life. There we meet ourselves without roles or labels. Simply a human being who is breathing, feeling, and aware. When we have the courage to pass through loneliness, we no longer fear silence. We learn that in this solitary journey, we have not been lost at all. We are returning. Principle 8. Choosing mindfulness over multitasking. In modern life, doing many things at once is often seen as a sign of ability and efficiency. We eat while looking at our phones. We listen to someone while already thinking about our reply. We work while worrying about the next step. The mind is constantly divided. When attention becomes fragmented, inner life also becomes scattered. We are present in many places, yet absent from the very moment we are living. Buddhism clearly recognizes the consequence of this state. When the mind is not fully with one thing, it cannot understand it deeply. Mindfulness is not about slowing down in a forced way, but about returning to the wholeness of attention. The Buddha once taught that when you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. This teaching is not merely advice about daily habits. It points directly to the nature of awareness. When we eat while the mind is wandering, the meal becomes nothing more than food entering the mouth. But when we eat with mindfulness, each flavor and each movement of the body becomes vivid. We realize that nourishment comes not only from food, but from presence. In the same way, A small task done with full attention brings a deeper sense of fullness than many large tasks performed with a divided mind. In Buddhism, no moment is considered insignificant. Washing dishes, sweeping the floor, walking or breathing can all become doorways to awareness. The sacred does not lie in what we are doing, but in how we are present. When we are fully present with something small, the mind no longer searches for something else to complete the moment. The present moment is the only place that truly exists. The past lives only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. Yet the mind repeatedly abandons the present to wander between these two unreal places. Mindfulness brings us back, not through tension or effort, but through gentle knowing. We know we are breathing. We know we are walking. We know we are alive. When we choose mindfulness over multitasking, life does not become slower. It becomes deeper. The mind is no longer stretched in many directions at once, so it naturally settles. In that settling, we feel life unfolding right here. And in this very ordinary moment, inner transformation occurs quietly, yet steadily. Principle 9. Accepting what is and changing what you can. In life, people often confuse acceptance with giving up. When we hear the word acceptance, we fear that we will become weak, passive, or resigned to suffering. Yet in Buddhism, acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is the first act of wisdom. It allows us to see reality clearly before deciding our next step. When we do not accept what is happening, the mind immediately falls into resistance. We wish things were different. We deny our feelings. We blame ourselves, blame others, blame circumstances. In that resistance, a great deal of energy is consumed, yet no transformation occurs. We become exhausted not because the situation is difficult, but because we are fighting reality. Buddhism teaches the middle way. It does not fall into indulgence, nor does it fall into force. Acceptance in the spirit of the middle way means stopping and looking directly. Looking at what is truly happening in the body and mind. There is pain present. There is fear present. There is loss present. When we allow truth to be present without judgment, the mind begins to settle. In that settling, perception becomes clearer. Acceptance does not change circumstances immediately, but it changes our position in relation to them. We are no longer swept away by panic or reactivity. We stand more firmly. When we stop resisting the present moment, we gain the space to recognize what lies within our capacity and what does not. This discernment is the expression of wisdom. There are things we can change through mindful action. There are limits that need to be respected. When we try to change what cannot be changed, the mind falls into frustration. When we neglect what can be changed, the mind falls into passivity. The middle way helps us walk between these two extremes. We act when action is needed, and we let go when letting go is needed. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. When action arises from acceptance, it carries a different quality. It is not rushed. It is not violent. It is not driven by the need to prove anything. We speak a necessary truth. We set a needed boundary. We change a habit that is no longer healthy. Yet all of this is done from a mind that is settled, not to escape suffering, but to care for life with awareness. When we learn to accept what is, the mind is no longer split between desire and reality. Energy is gathered back. From there, action becomes more lucid. We are no longer driven by fear or agitation. We walk from wisdom. And in the way we walk, peace gradually appears in the midst of a changing and uncertain world. Principle 10. Choosing compassion. Especially toward yourself, people often find it easy to open their hearts to the pain of others, yet remain very harsh toward themselves. When someone else makes a mistake, we look for reasons to understand. When we ourselves stumble, we criticize, condemn, and replay the failure again and again in the mind. The inner voice becomes sharper than any judgment from the outside. We turn ourselves into the strictest guard of our own life. In Buddhism, compassion is not meant only for others. The Buddha taught that compassion must begin in one's own heart. If we cannot treat ourselves gently, Any kindness we offer to others will eventually run dry. Metta is not a random feeling. It is a way of living, a sincere wish that both we and others may be safe and at ease. The inner voice is the environment in which the soul lives. If that voice is filled with blame, the soul contracts. If it is filled with constant demands, the soul becomes exhausted. But when that voice carries understanding and care, the soul begins to open. We are no longer afraid of making mistakes, no longer afraid of not being enough. We dare to learn, to try, and to stand up again after falling. Many people believe that self-compassion means indulgence, weakness, or avoiding responsibility. Yet in Buddhism, self-compassion is strength. It does not deny mistakes, but it does not use mistakes as punishment. It looks directly at difficulty with an attitude of care. Like a mother who, seeing her child in pain, does not scold the child for falling, but gently helps them up. When we fail, instead of saying we are useless, we can say we are learning. When we are tired, instead of forcing ourselves to be strong, we allow ourselves to rest. Small changes in how we speak to ourselves create deep transformation. We no longer live in an inner environment filled with tension. We create a safe space where healing can happen. Self-compassion also naturally expands our heart toward others. When we no longer strain to be perfect, we judge less. We understand that everyone is carrying their own burden. Compassion then is not something we try to display, but something that flows from a deep understanding of shared human suffering. When we choose compassion, especially toward ourselves, the journey of inner transformation becomes lighter. It is no longer a battle to fix ourselves, but a return to caring. In that care, old wounds are gradually soothed, and from that gentleness, true healing strength begins to grow. Principle 11: Breaking the cycle by breaking the thought. According to the Buddha's teaching, the mind leads all phenomena. Every experience in life arises from the way we think. A thought repeated long enough becomes a belief. A belief that is nurtured guides our actions, and actions repeated over time create the life we are living. This is why when we feel trapped in a cycle of suffering, the deeper cause is not found in circumstances, but in the thoughts we have come to believe as truth. Many thoughts appear in the mind each day without our awareness. They pass quickly, and we become used to following them automatically. I am not good enough. Everything always goes wrong for me. I cannot change. These statements are not absolute truths. They are simply habits of thinking formed by the past. Yet when we do not observe them, they lead us as if we had no other choice. Buddhism does not encourage replacing negative thoughts with positive ones by force. That is not awakening. That is only false positivity. What is invited here is awareness. First, we learn to observe thoughts as we would observe a phenomenon. We see them come. We see them go. We do not rush to believe them. We do not rush to fight them. With enough distance, we begin to question, is this thought true? Does this thought reduce my suffering? Does it reflect reality in its fullness? When a thought is seen deeply, we often realize it is only a narrow perspective. At that point, we do not need to force ourselves to think differently. A new thought arises naturally, softer, more open. Instead of "I always fail," we may see that sometimes we do not succeed, but we are learning. Instead of "I cannot change," we see that we are changing little by little. This is not deceiving ourselves. It is seeing with fuller wisdom. Meditation allows this process to unfold more deeply. When we sit in stillness, we begin to recognize familiar loops in the mind. Old thoughts appear again and again. And for the first time, we do not chase them. We simply breathe and observe. In that observing, the power of thoughts gradually weakens. We are no longer carried away as before. We begin to experience choice. Freedom does not come from having no thoughts. Freedom comes from not being ruled by thoughts. When we break one old thought, we open a new path. From a new thought, a new emotion appears. From a new emotion, a new action is born, and from there, a new cycle begins to form. A cycle of understanding, of compassion, and of awareness. Inner transformation does not require anything outside to change. It begins the moment we pause and look at how we are thinking. In the moment we no longer blindly believe an old thought, the door to freedom opens. And through that door, we step out of the cycle of suffering and into a more conscious way of living. Principle 12. Returning to the breath as your anchor. Amid all the movements of life, there is one thing that is always there, never leaving us even for a single moment. That is the breath. When the mind runs to the past or leaps into the future, the breath remains in the present. It carries no memories. It holds no predictions. It happens only now. For this reason, in Buddhism, the breath is seen as the most direct doorway that brings us back to the life that is unfolding. The Buddha taught the practice of anapanasati not as a complex technique, but as a very natural path. Breathing in, knowing you are breathing in. Breathing out, knowing you are breathing out. That is all. Yet within this simplicity, a deep connection is established. The breath becomes the bridge between body and mind. When the mind is scattered, the body tightens. When attention returns to the breath, the body begins to soften and the mind gradually settles. In daily life, we often breathe without knowing that we are breathing. The breath becomes short, rapid, and unconscious, especially in moments of stress or anxiety. When we return to the breath with awareness, the nervous system begins to adjust. The heart rate slows. The body senses safety. The mind is no longer swept away by an endless stream of thoughts. This is where science and spirituality meet. Modern studies show that paying attention to the breath reduces stress, stabilizes emotions, and improves concentration. Buddhism recognized this truth thousands of years ago through direct observation. Breathing meditation does not aim to eliminate thoughts. Thoughts may still arise. The difference is that we are no longer pulled along by them. Each time we notice the mind wandering, we gently bring attention back to the breath, without blame, without force, without disappointment, simply returning. Each return is a training in presence. Each return is a reminder that we are here. The breath thus becomes an anchor. When waves of emotion rise, the anchor keeps us from drifting too far. When life feels unsteady, the anchor helps us not lose our center. We do not need to change circumstances to find peace. We only need to pause and breathe. In a single mindful breath, the entire body-mind system reorganizes itself naturally. Each breath is a return to the body sitting here, a return to the mind sensing here. Not a return to an ideal image, but a return to reality as it is. And in that return, immediate inner transformation takes place. Quiet, undramatic, yet deeply real. Immediate inner transformation is not found in something distant. It does not wait for us to become someone else. It happens in the very moment we recognize the breath, moving in and out, and recognize that we are alive. When we know how to breathe and know that we are breathing, we step onto the path of freedom that the Buddha pointed to. A path that does not begin in the future, but begins right here, in this very breath. The 12 principles you have just walked through were not created to change the outer world. They do not ask you to become someone else or to fix your life. These teachings gently guide you back to yourself, back to the place of peace that has been present even before all striving. If, while listening, you recognized moments of exhaustion, of feeling lost, of doubting yourself, remember that nothing is broken here. You are not wrong. You are awakening in your own way. Now pause for a moment. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out gently. Feel the body sitting here. Feel the mind listening. There is nothing else you need to do. Just be present. If this video helped you pause and remember that you are alive, please like or subscribe to this channel. I return to myself,